Okay, open up your Bibles, if you would, to Matthew chapter 27. Matthew chapter 27. What a great chapter. We're going to be closing out our study of Matthew. Who likes to watch movies? I like movies. I'm not too excited about a lot of the new movies today, but I like some of the old. You like movies, Declan? All right. My favorite, Wildcrats? Oh, that's a great TV show. I actually like that too. You like Wildcrats?
Oh, not anymore.
Not anymore. Oh, I really like it. Anyway, one of my favorite movies is the Lord of the Rings movies. And of course, I feel like that just came out not that long ago, but it's been, 25, 26 years since that came out. What kind of production, how much, the scale of that production, what do you think that would be? How much do you think it cost to make those movies? Let's see. Each film had a budget of around $94 million each, so $281 million to make those movies. At the height of filming, they had more than 2,400 crew members working on it, over 20,600 extras appearing on screen. And they went on to make $3 billion worldwide. Pretty amazing. And you watch some of the older movies, trailers really, they always would say cast of thousands. They always make a big deal of how many people would be in the movie and all this stuff that they put in to try to make it a big battle between good and evil or whatever it might be. Matthew's account here of Jesus' death and burial is told in a very dramatic sense, very big scene, and you got this sweeping, kind of like an epic cinematic where all these people and groups are involved. Of course, not a work of fiction. It's a true eyewitness record of one of the greatest acts of love of mankind. But as we work through this, I want us to try to picture in our mind what we're seeing here. I want to kind of work through each group, each person as they appear in this kind of a scene that's being painted out for us. And the first group we see is in Matthew 27, verse 1. You got the Sanhedrin Council. And they're mentioned quite a bit here in the chapter. So you got the chief priests, the elders of the people. They've conferred together about Jesus to put him to death. They bound him. They hand him over to Pilate, the governor. Later, they persuaded the crowd to demand Barabbas rather than Jesus to be released. Barabbas was a murderer. And they crucified Jesus. And then they returned on the Sabbath to request the tomb be sealed and guarded. Why do they do this? Why are they so adamantly opposed, Caleb, to Jesus?
They don't want the disciples to steal Jesus' body.
All right, they're worried about them stealing. And why would they be worried about them stealing the body of Jesus?
To say that he would get resurrected.
To say he was resurrected, that's right. So they were going out of the way to make sure the whole idea and teaching of Jesus is put to rest, right, and done with. In the other Gospels, they conducted the illegal nighttime trial. We read about that in Mark and Luke. John records their earlier plots, fearing Roman intervention if Jesus continued in his ministry. So there was a lot of drama in the backdrop of them. So you have them. Then you have Pilate, the governor, showing up in verse 2. He's the Roman governor who questions Jesus. Are you the king of the Jews? Offered to release him or Barabbas. Washed his hands of it. He was trying to make him clean his conscience, I guess, with that, but that wasn't going to work. He showed contempt for the Jewish leaders while being politically weak and placed the Roman soldiers at their disposal. And all throughout the other four Gospels, John gives us the longest private dialogue between him and Jesus, where Jesus tells him, my kingdom is not of this world. He also, in Luke 23, records Pilate declaring Jesus innocent 3 times and sends him over to Herod as well to have him examine him. And yet still sends him to be crucified. And then verse 3, Judas, who betrayed him. When he saw Jesus had been condemned, as we saw in the pew packers, he felt remorse and returned the 30 pieces of silver. What does it mean to feel remorse? What does that mean? Feel bad for what you did. Does it cause you to make it right? See some people shaking their heads, and yes. Did it cause Judas to make it right? What should he have done? Repented. Well, what did he do? So, he returned the money. Gave it.
Well, I don't know, I can't remember if it's in chapter 26 or 25, but Jesus literally just looked at him and said, "You're gonna betray me." So you were like,
Yeah.
he's
He
like,
knew he was going to do it, and he went out and did it
Yeah,
anyway.
he went and did it anyway, so
For
it's like double remorse.
Yeah. And he had remorse, but it did not. That remorse did not push him to do what he needed to do. And so Acts chapter 2 tells us what happened to him. He hung himself. The other Gospels show the betrayal is recorded in all four. And of course in Acts 1, it's where he kills himself in that field that became known as the Field of Blood. Then next, in Matthew 27, 9 through 10, we get another character. It's Jeremiah, but it's not Jeremiah. It's Jeremiah playing the part of Zechariah. For it's quoted there in verses 9 and 10. The purchase of the potter's field fulfills that which was spoken of through Jeremiah the prophet. But that quote came from Zechariah chapter 11. Maybe you ever noticed that and never wondered about that? That in Matthew, the quote in Zechariah is attributed to Jeremiah. Was that a mistake on Matthew's part? In our study of Matthew, who is he primarily writing to? Jews, Gentiles, or the Romans? It's the Jews. He's primarily writing to the Jews. In the Jewish Bible, we take on some of the things that they did in there. They name books and letters from the excuse me, from the opening of the passage. However, excuse me. Whatever the first few words are, that's generally the name of that book or section. And when they put the prophets together, all the writings of the prophets, the very first prophet was Jeremiah. And they would often, you see this in their own secular writings, when they would reference to the prophets, they would say, found in the prophets of Jeremiah. Or they would say, found in Jeremiah, but they'd be quoting whatever prophet it is. So Matthew didn't make a mistake. It's not some error that people find in the Bible. He's writing the way the Jews always have written, and giving reference to Jeremiah the prophet, that is the section of the prophets found in their Bible. So I just wanted to put that in there for that reason. And Matthew is the only one who makes this quote. The other Gospels don't do it. And then you have Jesus the victim in verse 11, the central innocent victim. He cries out, he's crucified between two robbers, my God, why have you forsaken me? And he yields the Spirit, triggering the earthquake, the tearing of the veil, the resurrection of the saints. And again, Pew Packers, upon the questions, when I had that question about the tearing of the veil from the bottom, top to the bottom, or the other possibility was from the bottom to the top, why is it significant that it mentions that it was torn from top to the bottom? Why is that significant? How high is this ceiling, Caleb?
Like 12 feet.
Can you reach it?
No.
No. How high do you think the ceiling was in the temple, and how tall that curtain was that separated the Holy of Holies, the Holy from the Holy of Holies?
50 feet.
It's pretty high. Yeah, I don't know how high it was, but it's pretty high. And that curtain was a thick, thick weave. Arnold Schwarzenegger would not be able to tear that in half. And it tore from the top down in half. Pretty amazing. All four Gospels center in on Jesus. Luke and John, though, they record additional sayings of Jesus on the cross. The 7 last words are compiled across all of them, that my God, why have you forsaken me? That we find that in all of them. But only John emphasizes the phrase, it is finished. Our little scene continues with Barabbas, the notorious prisoner, in verse 16, being held during the Passover. The custom to release a prisoner was offered. And that's a perfect picture of substitution. The guilty goes free, the innocent dies in his place. Mark and Luke describe him as an insurrectionist who committed murder in a rebellion. John calls him a robber, or some translations say bandit. Then you have Pilate's wife in verse 19, who suffered greatly from a dream. And she even tells her husband, Pilate, have nothing to do with this righteous man. For last night I suffered greatly in a dream because of him. So it was divine warning added to Pilate's inner turmoil. This is another situation that's unique only to Matthew's gospel. You don't find it in any of the others. Verses 20 and 23, you have the multitudes clamoring for the death of Jesus. We see that also in Mark and Luke and John. You have the soldiers who mocked him in verse 27. Their public brutal mockery fulfilled their roles as executioners. Mark gives a similar account. John gives some added details for us on the scourging. And then in verse 32, you have this interesting fellow, Simon of Cyrene, who is pressed into service to carry the cross of Christ. Mark, over in verse 21, adds that he was the father of Alexander and Rufus. We'll get to that, more of that here in a second. Luke says they laid the cross on him to carry it behind Jesus. John notes Jesus initially carried the cross himself. But I find it interesting in the book of Mark, Mark 15, verse 21, when he mentions Simon of Cyrene, in a little parenthetical statement is given there that he is the father of Alexander and Rufus. Why would he say that? And Simon carried the cross. That's the father of Alexander and Cyrene. Why would he say that? If I was telling you about somebody, let's say I was telling you about a girl whose first name is Macy, it just happens to be the same as my last name. Her name is Macy. And I begin to tell you all about her, and you're thinking, okay, who is this? And I say, oh, Macy, that's the daughter of Guy Orbison. Would that help you in context of who that is? Because you know who Guy Orbison is, right? So the people that Mark is writing to know who Rufus and Alexander are. Probably Christians. Simon probably came to Christ because of this incident, and his own children were saved. And now they are known to the church. Interesting, isn't it? Who were they? What all had they done? But that situation affected Simon. He got to know who Jesus was. And then you have the two robbers who were crucified with him there in verses 38 and 44. Luke gives us the detailed conversation where one mocks, the other repents and receives Jesus. John confirms the two were crucified with him. Mark doesn't mention the robbers at all in his Gospels. The passerbyers in verse 39, when he was on the cross, who said, you who are going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. They demonstrated ignorance, that mob mentality of just grabbing on of the situation and going along with what they were seeing and hearing. In verses 52 and 53, you have those who are resurrected and were brought back to life. But before I go forward, Caleb, you got a question?
Yeah, in my version, it makes it sound like both robbers were like insulting.
In Matthew, they were. They were both insulting him. One of them does not repent in Matthew's account. But we do see that over in Luke's account. He gives us some more details on that. What's his name? J.W. McGarvey put together what's called the Fourfold Gospel. He went through and wrote out the whole of all four Gospels together in a chronological order, having all the information laid out. When you study through things, you got to remember, you're not always getting all the information. And Luke found out that one of those robbers actually said this and was repented after he probably did insult Jesus, probably felt remorse and then acted on that and repented. And then Jesus said, you will be with me in paradise. We get a fuller picture when we look at all four Gospels. Kind of like when there is a car accident, the cops come and they talk to this witness and then this witness and then this witness, and after talking to all of them, they're able to extrapolate all that and put together a full picture of what's going on. We need to do the same thing when we study through the Gospels. And you have these, as we were saying in there in verses 52 and 53, after Jesus' death, many of the saints who had died came up out of the grave and walked into the city. You have the centurion in verse 54. When after everything had happened, he says, truly this was the Son of God. Luke has him recorded as saying, certainly this man was innocent. And then you have the women in verses 55 and 56. Many women who had followed Jesus from Galilee and ministered to him were looking on from a distance, including Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. Their presence, again, highlight the esteem of women in Christianity. The other Gospels, Mark and Luke, name more, including Salome. You know, only John's Gospel mentions that Mary, the mother of Jesus, is there at the foot of the cross. The other three, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they do not mention her in this scene. You have Joseph of Arimathea. That's just how I say it. Oh, he's not paying attention to me. Arimathea. He's a disciple of Jesus, asked Pilate for the body, wrapped it in a clean linen. He was helped by Nicodemus with the spices as well. We see that from John. And you have the soldiers who secured the tomb. They're at the very end and watched over it. So we had this whole cast, as they would say in the 50s, a cast of thousands in Matthew 27. Plotting religious leaders, a conflicted governor, the remorseful betrayer, the mocking soldiers, faithful women, the secret disciple, the confessing centurion, even the Roman guard who sealed the tomb. We even have people coming out of their graves and back to life and walking into the city. What an amazing scene. What an amazing movie that would make. Each one was a real person whose life collided with the Son of God in those fateful hours. Their choices, their words, their actions, their responses all played a part in this great drama that's being played out. And as the curtain closes on this scene, the stone is sealed, the soldiers are posted. Maybe we're thinking this is the end as we think that the credits are going to begin to roll, and maybe you're thinking, oh, he's going to go to the resurrection, but I'm not. As that camera is watching, God moves the camera away from that scene of how all those people reacted to Jesus, and he points that camera at you and me. We're not just spectators having our popcorn, sitting on the sidelines. We have to have a reaction also. What are we doing? Where are we in this picture? It calls for participation. You think Simon, Cyrene, when he was walking along, thought, you know what, I think I want to wait over here until I can help out this fellow with that cross. You think the women went there to think, hey, let's go and just watch, see what's going on. They were there because they wanted to participate and be there for Jesus. And everyone had a reaction. And now God turns the camera to us. And he's asking, how do you react? Sometimes it's easy for us to just read it in our Bibles and say, yeah. But does it cause us to really change who we are? A lot of people have a remorse. A lot of people have a reaction to what they see, and yeah, he was a good man, but nothing like Judas, nothing ever really changes in their lives. But this should change our lives. We should have and be an equal participant in these unfolding scenes. Our sins help put Jesus upon that cross. 1 Peter 3:18, for Christ also died for sins once for all, the just for the unjust, so that he might bring us to God, having been put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the Spirit. But unfaithfulness causes us to, as Hebrews 6 tells us, to again crucify to themselves the Son of God and put him to open shame. And so the question echoes, where are we in this picture? Because it's not just them. It's still rolling, and we're participants in it as well. I love that chapter. I love how Matthew goes through and shows us every person, every group, everyone that's part of that. And we need to remember we're participants also. And the world needs to remember that too. Any thoughts, any questions on Matthew 27?